Spain woke up to history in motion when Princess Leonor, heir to the Spanish throne, reported for her first day at the San Javier Air Force Academy. At just 19 years old, the young royal stepped into one of the most demanding chapters of her military training, facing challenges that would test her body, her mind, and her spirit. But what captured the world's imagination that morning was a single image: Leonor boarding a military aircraft, her hair tucked neatly under her cap, her stride steady, her eyes filled with both nerves and determination. This was not merely another training exercise. It was a symbolic moment, the first time Spain's future queen lifted herself into the skies, bound by duty but carried by dreams. It was barely sunrise when the gates of San Javier opened to receive its newest cadets. The murmur of military precision filled the air, boots striking pavement, engines roaring to life, instructors barking orders with the sharp edge of discipline. Among the hundreds of recruits, one figure stood out, not because of her crown, but because of her resolve. Princess Leonor arrived in modest style. No motorcade of glittering limousines, no flashing jewels, no indulgent display of royalty. Instead, she appeared in full cadet uniform, blending into the ranks. The only sign of her singular destiny was the faint ripple among fellow cadets who whispered to one another as they realized who was marching beside them. Observers noted how she carried herself. Not with arrogance, but with quiet dignity. She shook hands with instructors, exchanged firm greetings with fellow recruits, and took her place in line like everyone else. It was a statement without words: she was here not as a princess, but as a soldier in training. The climax of that first day arrived when Leonor and her peers were led toward the hangars. Lined up across the tarmac were gleaming trainer aircraft, their wings catching the morning light. For cadets, this was the rite of passage, stepping aboard an aircraft for the first time, leaving the safety of the ground to embrace the unforgiving sky. Leonor's face was calm, though witnesses noticed the slight tightening of her jaw, the measured breath she took as her name was called. A hush seemed to fall over the gathered recruits. Even the instructors, hardened by years of training young pilots, acknowledged the weight of the moment. This was no ordinary cadet boarding a plane. This was the heir to Spain. She walked across the tarmac with a steady pace, saluted her instructor, and climbed into the cockpit. For a brief second, as she fastened the straps and adjusted her helmet, her eyes flickered with the vulnerability of a 19-year-old girl. Then, with a small nod, she transformed again, not a girl, not even just a princess, but a cadet ready to confront the sky. The engine roared to life. The propellers cut through the morning air. And as the aircraft lifted off, Spain held its breath. The images were broadcast within minutes. Newspapers, television networks, and social media flooded with headlines. Leonor takes flight, future queen soars into history. From throne to cockpit, princess begins San Javier training. A royal flight that inspires a nation. On the streets of Madrid, Spaniards gathered around shop windows displaying live broadcasts. In Zaragoza, where Leonor had spent the previous year at the military academy, her fellow cadets cheered her on from afar. At cafes in Seville, Valencia, and Barcelona, conversations paused as screens replayed the moment again and again. "She is one of us now," an elderly veteran remarked while watching the footage. "She is not above duty. She is embracing it." Teenagers on social media praised her courage, with thousands of posts celebrating her as a role model. Young women in particular expressed admiration, noting how Leonor was shattering stereotypes of what it meant to be royal, what it meant to be female, and what it meant to be a leader. For Leonor, this day was not simply about personal courage. It was about continuity, about upholding a tradition that tied her directly to centuries of monarchs before her. King Felipe VI, her father, had himself walked the grounds of San Javier as a young man. Satu had generations of Spanish royals who understood that the crown was not inherited by comfort, but by discipline and sacrifice. The difference now was visibility. In an age of cameras and instant broadcasts, Leonor's journey was not a private trial but a public spectacle, dissected and discussed in every corner of Spain and beyond. Historians were quick to point out the symbolism. When a future queen boards a plane, said Professor Javier Medina, a scholar of Spanish monarchy, she carries not only herself but the hopes of a nation. The plane becomes more than a machine. It becomes an emblem of her flight into the future of Spain. Inside the royal household, emotions ran high. Queen Letizia, ever protective of her daughters, reportedly watched the live broadcast with tears in her eyes. Close friends revealed that the Queen had been nervous about Leonor's transition to San Javier, especially the risks involved in aviation training. Yet when she saw her daughter climb into the cockpit with such calm determination, pride overshadowed fear. King Felipe, himself a pilot, offered words of encouragement privately but allowed Leonor the space to make her own mark. She must own this path, he was overheard saying. The sky must become her teacher, just as it once was mine. Infanta Sofía, Leonor's younger sister, shared a heartfelt post on her private account, writing, "Today my sister takes to the skies. She is not only my sister, but my hero." The world, too, watched with fascination. In Denmark, Crown Prince Christian reportedly sent a congratulatory message, while in the United Kingdom, commentators compared Leonor's training to the young Prince William and Prince Harry's military service. Across Latin America, where Spain's monarchy holds symbolic ties, headlines praised her as La Reina del Futuro, the Queen of the Future. Even leaders outside Europe took notice. Aviation schools in the United States, Brazil, and Japan highlighted the footage as an example of leadership through action. When a royal enters a cockpit, she doesn't just represent herself, one American flight instructor noted. She represents courage for every young pilot who dares to dream. Yet behind the symbolism and grandeur lies the simple truth of a young woman facing fear. Sources close to the princess revealed that Leonor admitted to nervousness before boarding. The thought of leaving the ground, of trusting her life to machinery and training, weighed heavily. But she also recognized that fear is not a weakness, it is the first step toward courage. In her private diary, which remains closely guarded, Leonor is said to have written, "When I lift off, I carry with me my family, my country, and my own fragile heart. The sky is vast, but I must learn to find my place in it." Those words, though never officially published, have already begun circulating in whispers among palace aides, adding a deeply personal layer to the day's events. By nightfall, Spain's future queen had returned to base, her first flight completed. She was no longer simply Princess Leonor. She was Cadet Bourbon, a young woman who had taken her first step into the vast, unforgiving world of aviation. But more than that, she had become a symbol. A symbol of dedication, of courage, of breaking boundaries. For young Spaniards struggling with uncertainty, Leonor's flight represented the possibility of rising above challenges. For women across Europe, it was a reminder that no field, not even military aviation, was beyond reach. In the end, Leonor's first day at San Javier was not about protocol, nor spectacle, nor politics. It was about one young woman stepping into a cockpit, strapping herself in, and choosing to rise. This is only the beginning. Ahead of Leonor lie grueling months of flight hours, academic study, physical training, and emotional trials. She will face failures, she will endure setbacks, and she will confront fears she never imagined. But she has also set in motion a narrative larger than herself, one that ties the destiny of Spain to the courage of its future queen. As night fell over San Javier and the academy lights dimmed, one thing became clear: history had taken flight that morning. And somewhere high above, in the roar of engines and the sweep of wings, Princess Leonor had written her first chapter in the skies.